Hello, Catalina. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you, Toy. How are you?
I'm good. I'm very excited about this interview that we have today, and I want to go ahead and get right on into things.
Thank you. I'm really excited too, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you. So tell me, who is Catalina Egan?
Well, Catalina Egan is a 54-year-old mother of one, married 22 years, originally from Mexico City, Mexico. I've lived in various countries, and thanks to that, I speak four languages. And I am a mother and a wife first, and then an author. I like to always put, or a writer, because there's a difference between just being an author and a writer. I like to write in different modalities. And I am the author of The Bridge of Deaths, and I write under my initials, M.C.V. Egan, which stand for Maria Catalina Vergara Egan. That's about it in a nutshell.
Wow, I like that. I've actually met a few people from Mexico City before, and I just think that's so amazing. This country is built of people who come from other places, but to actually meet someone from there, I still think that's really cool. I love the fact that you speak four languages. I'm still working on English, but I think that's wonderful. I want to really learn another foreign language. I've studied a little Spanish, so I can communicate a little bit, but I want to be proficient one day. And I love the fact that you said that you're a wife and mother first and then a writer. I feel the same way. I'm not a mother, but I am a wife, and I do try to make sure I don't neglect those responsibilities while I pursue, my writing. So I feel connected to you, so I think this is going to be a really good interview.
Thank you.
All right, so what you got for me today? Tell me about this book.
The only book I have out, the only book I have published is The Bridge of Deaths, and it has been out for about 2 years, and it's started getting more and more attention lately. The book revolves around a real plane crash in 1939 in Denmark, 2 weeks before Hitler invaded Poland, and 5 men were reported dead on board. And the narrative of the book is told from a modern perspective of a young couple researching their past lives. The book has a very strong factual element with documented footnotes, but it also has a fictional narrative that takes the reader, gives all the information with more ease. You can't imagine how many readers have told me that I taught them how to love history, which is a very cool thing to hear, I think. And the book is historical, but Amazon hasn't known how to rate me, or like the genre. They haven't known how to specify me. So I'm one of the very few, if not only, book on Amazon that doesn't have, because they say, it's a historical fiction, but some people say it's really more fact. It has the romance element, it has a metaphysical element that I used to market as paranormal, but then I realized you need a vampire, and I don't have one. So, and the metaphysical is because I used psychics that did psychometry and that held an object and gave the story they saw. And I also used past life regressions, not my own, and the individual asked to be anonymous. That's why I had to create some fictional characters to give that individual the anonymity he requested. And so that's about it.
What that's a lot. I mean,
I
that
know.
sounds no, but I mean it sounds really cool. I've recently been in a couple of different forums where people have talked about the pros and cons of historical fiction as opposed to just reading, a true, a work of nonfiction. And I take the same, approach as a lot of other people who feel like a historical fiction novel that is has a lot of factual information in it, I think actually reaches people a lot more than just, straight up factual, a nonfiction work piece of work. And not that I'm against, nonfiction in any way, but I like
Well,
historical fiction because I think it makes it more relatable to the reader.
absolutely, absolutely. The danger in some historical fiction is that you can take the liberty to really change the real element of history. The huge difference between a traditional historical fiction novel and The Bridge of Deaths is that everything that's truly historical is footnoted. There are over 200 footnotes, and I went to archives in England, in Denmark. I interviewed people. I used newspaper microfilm. I'm so lucky to be near FAU. Florida Atlantic University has in microfilm the last 200 years of the London Times. So everything that I meticulously researched is there. So I get a lot of readers that say, you had me looking up the stuff because you told me where I could go. And the most interesting and exciting archive I ever went to, it's by appointment only. I mean, you have to request. And it was in the Parliament, in the British Parliament, that beautiful picture we all see.
Yeah.
But I went through the back. I didn't, when you go as a tourist and they take you to the things we can see on C-SPAN with the green chairs and the people arguing, that's not where I went. I went to the back and I went through this super security, and then I had to go up a spiral staircase, really the back of the house, and then I went into a little reading room where they only allow 8 people a day, and you get your full day, and that's it.
Wow.
And it was very exciting. So the Bridge of Death, there's no question as to what's real and what's not. And that's where it's kind of a factual history book encrusted inside a novel.
Well, I'm already impressed. I mean, just hearing you talk about, I mean, the research alone that went into this book, and then you had to create a narrative around that. Oh, I got to get to my next question because it's about the book. So who's starring in this book? Tell me about the characters.
The main characters in the modern era are Bill, Maggie, and Catalina. And the reason I had to name that character by my name is because while researching, the name Catalina opened so many doors for me, because a huge brunt of my research was with airline people, with airline archives. And apparently there's a seaplane called a Catalina. So these people would meet me and they'd go, "Oh, you're named after a sort of aircraft." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Not really. I'm named after a saint, but I'll take aircraft. In America, it's salad dressing, so I'll take aircraft." So, that's why I had to name her Catalina, but she is not me. She's lonely, obsessed. She's not married. She doesn't have a child. She doesn't even have a dog. If my life were that open, I'd have written 100 books by now. So, but anyhow, so that's Catalina is this middle-aged woman researching, and Bill is a 30-something super successful guy that gets transferred to London on business, and his phobias and nightmares that he suffered for the greater part of his life really become excessive and paralyzing because the element of his past life is very linked to England. And Maggie is the half Danish, half British girl that he falls in love with that helps him open to the possibility of really exploring his past life and just cleaning whatever karmic residue he has, and to get rid of his nightmares.
So is there an interaction between the two that are in the romance and then and with Catalina?
That's how, as they're researching, they connect. They see the young couple sees her name in the archives because some of them you have to sign in. And so Maggie, who's very gutsy and aggressive, decides, why should I do any of the work? This lady's already been thinking about this plane crash. Let me, connect with her and ask her what she's found. So the brunt of the narrative is between the two women. These two women forge a transatlantic, transgenerational friendship and transcultural. where they exchange the information that they find and they dissect it and they explore it and they question it.
I like that a
And
lot. I mean,
it's fun. And my favorite is the absolute fictional character, the glue of the entire book, Maggie. I made her half British and half Danish because she needed to be knowledgeable about Denmark since the crash was in Denmark. I also made her what I hope to be able to honestly call myself someday. I made her a peace activist and a peacenik because the book really explores the roots of World War II. As one of the men who died was an English member of parliament who, in my opinion, should have never fallen through the cracks of history. And his name was Anthony Crossley. And so the narrative takes you through exploring different aspects of the roots of World War II, some that are little known and some of the things that were going behind the scenes. And then it also takes you through other historical aspects that started before World War II that still affect us, like the Palestinian territories. Anthony Crossley was called the voice of the Arabs. He was the only member of parliament before World War II that represented by choice, not by any link of birth. He was his mother was American and his dad was British, and he was a very upper class British gentleman. But he took a huge interest on what was called the Arab cause in regards to the Palestinian territories. So it explores nitty gritty of things that started some as far back as 1914, and we're still, as a society, as a world, paying the price for some of the decisions that the superpowers of that era made by making, like England gave the Palestinian territories, they promised them to both the Jewish interest and the Arab interest. And they created this whole quagmire that, 80, 90 years later, we're still a mess about those territories because politicians in a country that wasn't even there made a decision. So it explores all those things and it makes people think that if we're aware and we're knowledgeable, maybe we can have a voice and prevent wars. And that's who Maggie is. Maggie is this person that feels that through knowledge she can prevent wars, but she's also an activist that, got involved, almost got arrested during the Bush administration because when he visited England, the young students put ink in Trafalgar Square in the fountain to show that blood was flowing in Iraq and so on. So she's an activist and she's knowledgeable.
wow. So not only your character, but just the book itself is very multi-dimensional. I mean, that's
It is.
that's pretty. I mean, it takes talent to be able to do. I mean, you make it sound so fascinating. I got to read this book. All right, so you mentioned a little bit earlier, so you don't have to spend a lot of time on this question, but knowing how much you put into your books, do you mind telling me a little bit about your writing method?
Well, I am not a pantser. I'm not a fly by the seat of your pants, but I'm not an outliner, diehard outliner either. I do a combination of both. And I think the one thing that might differentiate me, but I've heard several famous authors interviewing saying the same thing, and it just evolved into that. I'm a list maker. I take these huge yellow pads and I make lists of everything I have to cover. And when I get there, I take off what I've covered to make sure I don't forget what I wanted to convey to the reader.
Okay, I like
So
that.
that
No, I
there
mean, it
you go.
makes sense. So you make lists. I'm kind of the same way. I outline a lot of things, but the list method it's very understandable, and I can see how I think more people should maybe keep lists because you can kind of tell sometimes when people started out with a concept and then didn't follow through with it because maybe they forgot to check their list. So I like that. I like
Thank
that.
you.
All right, so tell me about other maybe authors or people of influence who have influenced your writing.
I think that every single author I have ever read in my life has influenced my writing, maybe even to the degree of that's not what I want to do, or that is what I would love to do, the timing and so on. I'd like to think that what the product I ended up with is unique, and that we all have a very unique voice, and that I found mine, which took me a while. I wrote and rewrote and rewrote. But my all-time classic, super, I would be a groupie, is W. Somerset Maugham. And he has written a lot of books and plays that a lot of people have probably seen. Let me think of The Painted Veil was a movie with
Edward
I
Norton?
think yes,
Yes.
Edward Norton. Okay, that book is amazing, and they did a phenomenal job with a movie. So I love his long ones. I love Of Human Bondage. I love Liza of Lambeth and The Razor's Edge. So I like a lot of old British writers, not so old. I mean, not Chaucer or Shakespeare. Yes, they're great, but I don't mean that. I mean modern enough that I can grasp, but old enough that it's still an era that was very different from what we know today to be true. I also like a lot of new British authors. I mean, I like American authors as well. I'm a huge John Irving fan. But as British, young, modern British ones, I really like Nick Hornby. I love to literally wet my pants with his books. And I think my favorite one is Juliet Naked, which has nothing to do with nudity. It's a naked demo tape. It means that it hasn't been edited for a musician. And it's a great book that takes place mostly in great part in the United States. So
Wow.
those are, but I'm an avid reader, so that's a bad question. I could sit here for 2 hours.
I know. I do find that that's one of those questions where it's like, ugh, do I really want to ask it? But I'm always curious, to know what kind of works and what authors have, influenced writing, because I'm influenced, like you said, by pretty much everyone I've ever read. But, there are those that stand out. So I love asking that question.
Which ones stand out for you?
The main answer that I always give people is that I would say J.M. Barrie. He's the one who wrote the original plays, Peter and Wendy. And
I know, Peter Pan.
The reason why I think he influenced me, not that I write anything like him or anything like that was one of those stories that when I read it, I wanted to write something like that. It was very creative. I mean, I've read obviously I was young when I read it, and I had read other children's books. I love, Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, things like that. But something about Peter and Wendy, it's like the way he told it, almost from the kid's perspective. And the idea that a grown adult man could write this imaginative story that so appealed to children, like I wanted to be able to write something that appealed to someone else the way that story appealed to me. So there's my answer.
That's a very cool way to describe why someone inspired you. That's neat.
Thank you. And here's my next question. I like asking it just because of the way I word it. Whose brain are you itching to scratch? Whose head are you just wanting to get into?
Well, the person doesn't have to be alive, right?
Oh, no.
So then it would be Somerset Maugham. I just love the narrative that he put to such a wide variety of stories. And also because I was born in 1959, but in 1958, he wrote a book named Catalina. And the book starts on August 15th, which is the day of my plane crash. And when you get into chapter 4, Catalina goes to confession, and the priest that confesses her is Father Vergara, which is my maiden name.
Oh my goodness.
So I know, isn't it funny? And I mean, I was already a huge fan of this guy, and I was completely unaware of the book. But a good friend told me, I discovered a book by him that has your name on it and your last name. And I was like, no, that's not possible. And it's a very, very different type of book from many of the others that he wrote. So I would be very curious. That was one of his last works. So that would be the brain I would pick, and I would like really harp on that one book.
Wow, that's yeah. That's really cool. All right, so the next question I want to ask you is I thought of this question because someone once asked me something similar to it. And the question is, who is so you? Maybe someone famous or a fictional character that you really relate to, or maybe people compare you to.
I have a deep voice, so I've had people turn around in restaurants and say that I sound like Deborah Winger, the one in Legal Eagles. So I guess that. But from my perspective, who would I see as an alter ego? So me? Oof, I don't know. Have you ever answered the who is so you?
I have. Okay, as far as personality goes, a lot of people who know me, personally, they totally call me Daria. And I don't know if you get that reference, but it was a cartoon character created by M.C.V. And she's not
I wouldn't have known.
Yeah, she's not an outgoing kind of person. She's very smart, and she does have a sense of humor, but you have to get to know her to know she has a sense of humor. So I guess I'm kind of Daria when it comes to personality. People have said that I look like several different actresses, but I know that I look like my mom, so I kind of brush those off. I've been told I look like Janet Jackson, but I don't see it. And then
okay, so if you do that, like I remember being in England playing like a drinking game, and they put like and my husband works in insurance, so these people in Lloyd's, they like to drink, or they did, I think, when we were a little bit younger because we've been together so long. But they would put a little post-it note on your forehead of who they thought you looked like, and then you had to ask questions to guess.
Yeah.
And they did Jennifer Lopez with me, which I was incredibly flattered. I know that I would love to look like her. So heck,
I wouldn't mind looking like her. Well, yeah, okay. Let's see. My next question, this one is more about your experience as a reader. A lot of times I know as writers you have a hard time finding time to read. But as a reader, what's your ideal spot or your ideal situation to just sit down and read a good book?
In my reality, in my life today, the ideal spot is if everyone goes to sleep early at home and late at night in bed, because everything is quiet and relaxed. But I mean, when I was younger and my life was a little different, poolside reading, and especially a paperback that you just like crunch back. I have been using my Kindle, and it's enjoyable, and I like, especially now that I need reading glasses, that I can change the size of the font, whether I'm wearing reading glasses or not, or contacts or not. And so that's a good place. In my reality, also like waiting for my son, my car is a great place to read, because a lot of his activities where I take him, they don't like the parent sitting there waiting, in some waiting room. So sometimes I'll be outside with a Kindle and read. So those are my reading spots.
That's cool. I like that you're open to using technology, but you still appreciate, paper, I find that a lot of people are one or the other.
Oh, no. I mean, I love the ease of the Kindle is amazing. The ease of being able to have, and I'll tell you one thing that is amazing about that is I bought several dictionaries in different languages. So lately I've been reading The Three Musketeers in French, and it's been really fun. It's old French. So a lot of times I do need to look up a word, and it's a great feeling. It's fun. Or sometimes when I'm reading a really good modern book in English, I love to highlight certain words that I go, I love the way the author used that word here. I've never played with that word like that. So I'll highlight words, and then it's so cool to be able to go back to what you highlighted and then revise. So Kindle has truly morphed reading for me into more of a learning tool than I had ever realized I had used it as.
Wow, I love that. I mean, I agree with you. I think more people should try to take advantage of some of those features. All right, so my next question is a little bit about you again as a reader. Um, like I shared with you how I was interested in Peter and Wendy. What was your favorite book pre-teen years?
Um, I had a very strange upbringing with literature because I grew up in another country as a child. So books probably impacted me in a different way. But I remember reading over and over again a book that I can't tell you who wrote it. It had a lot of images, but it was about Richard the Lionheart and the Crusades. And the whole element of going to a foreign country and expanding your religion and all that really impacted me in a way that I didn't understand as a child. Like I thought I really admired him, and then as I got older and started understanding the concept more, so that's one that I remember impacted me. I read all the usual ones that everybody reads, but I didn't really fall madly in love with reading until I was 9 years old and I started reading in English, which is really funny. And I think it had a lot to do with not only that there was so much of a wider variety of interesting books, but also because I had the most incredible neighbor. She was an American lady whose husband was there with the Ford Foundation. So when she saw that I liked to read in English, she invited me to her house, and she had the most incredible library. And not only did she open it to me as, there it is, my children's library, read every book you want, but she gave me the coolest gift in the universe. Every time I finished a book and I brought it, she would make me an ice cream sundae. And in those days, this is pre-NAFTA, you didn't get like the cool, creamy American ice creams. Mexico has amazing food, don't get me wrong, but it was a foreign food that was not readily available everywhere. So she would make like these real all-American ice cream sundaes. She was from Minnesota, and she would sit down and go, tell me about the book, tell me what you liked, tell me what you didn't like. I don't know if she had a background in teaching or what. So then I started reading them too fast. So it would be like every 3 books, that I'd get my ice cream sundae.
Yeah.
But I went through all the Nancy Drews, all the Hardy Boys. She had these others that I've never been able to find that was like a flight attendant. She was kind of like Nancy Drew, but she was older and she was a flight attendant. So the settings were very international. I read a lot about Minnesota too, the 10,000 lakes. Anything for that ice cream sundae.
No one ever gave me ice cream for reading when I was little.
No, so I don't know if it was in part the stimuli that it came accompanied with this extraordinary, super duper, congratulations, like a gift per book that I read, or if I would have been as avid a reader, but it was certainly one of the coolest things that ever happened to me as a kid.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I remember, I know some schools still participate in it, but when Pizza Hut started their Read It program, I remember, I think the first year I participated in them, I think I was 11. And I don't know if you're familiar with Read It, but basically the kid reads like 12 books and then they get a free pizza. I don't know how many books I read, but I know I got at least 4 free pizzas that school year. So, I mean,
Great. No, yeah, I am familiar, but I can't take advantage of it because my son was born with severe food allergies, and they are dairy, eggs, and tree nuts. So pizza is not something that we can touch. But I have a son who is an avid reader, and he's so funny. Lately, he is completely and absolutely into the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And that thing is,
It's
because
big,
he's got
yeah.
the full edition. And he's so funny because he's read it so many times. And he came home from school one day and he said, this kid looked at me and said, is someone forcing you to read that huge book? And I said, no, I do it for fun. And he looked so confused.
Yeah, it does seem like less and less kids are reading, but I still think it's worth writing because there's someone out there like the lady you knew who's gonna engage some child and it'll all be worth it.
It's an amazing memory. And I don't think I've ever had an ice cream sundae that tasted as good as hers because she had like the whole whipped cream. I mean, she literally that must have been something about the United States that she missed. And she
Yeah.
was a slender lady. She was a tall, slender, pretty lady, Virginia Gamble. Very nice lady.
Wow, that's really cool. Okay, so the next couple of questions I'm gonna ask you, we're gonna kind of get away from books and reading and all that for a little while, just to get to know you a little bit as a person. So these questions, like I said, they aren't really gonna have anything directly to do with books. So
Okay.
I am a big movie buff. I'm a bit of a geek. So the next couple of questions are going to be geared around geekness.
Okay.
If you could only watch one movie for the rest of your life, what would it be?
That is so hard. That is so hard because I am a huge movie buff and I enjoy movies so tremendously. But if I could only watch one, then it would have to be one that's complicated and has a ton of messages. So it might be Gone with the Wind.
Cool. I've actually heard a lot of people are who didn't see it like a long time ago. People, it's starting to be like a thing now where people are going back and watching that movie. So yeah, that's cool. All right.
It's a good one.
Yeah, it is. And I love classic films, so you know. The next question is, what makes you geek out? Like, for instance, I'm all about Batman. You don't have to be about Batman, but what makes you geek out?
I am all about origami. And now
Oh,
lately I do geogami. So it's 3 dimensional. I mean, they're all 3 dimensional, but these are hard. They're like modules with different pieces.
yeah.
I will sit and work till I get the piece right. That's pretty geekish. Yeah, origami totally makes me geek out.
That's cool. I tried to do origami once. It didn't work, but I love seeing other people do. I just don't have the
Origami is
coordination.
something, origami is exactly like learning a language. It's exactly like a child learning how to walk and run. It's a step thing. You cannot grab a really complicated piece. You have to start like a little kid with the easiest folds. And I actually taught a class, an after school class that became very popular, and nobody was allowed to talk. And I would get like, it was a combination between like third and fifth graders. And the minute they walked in, they couldn't talk. We'd all go like that, put on really mild classical music, and then I would take the piece of origami paper and fold, and they would just follow the folds. Everything was visual like that, and we built up till we got to pretty difficult ones, and it really helped. I did it just for fun without having anybody having trained me to do that, but I think that it really taught these kids how to focus on one thing and do something from beginning to end. And I had a lot of parents that really just loved what the kids got out of that.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I actually did an after school program myself for a while, and it doesn't focus on origami, but that was could have been part of it. It was a hobby club, and the whole idea was it to help kids develop hobbies. And I thought the program would be a good way to give children, because not every kid is going to be on the football team or be a cheerleader, but they need to have some kind of outlet, because if not, that's how the kids ends up in the streets and things like that. So with my hobby club, I actually talked about collecting. That was my contribution because I collect comic books and action figures and stuff like that. But I talked to the kids about other things too. So I mean, origami is right up there. It's another
Oh, I
outlet.
love it. I
Yeah.
love it. I have so many books. I have so many. I just recently acquired one that I thought I had it handy, but I don't. Um, One on making that I think would be fun for girls, like clothing, but I don't know where I put it. I haven't opened it, but I love walking into Barnes and Nobles, and they have very often different sets. So it's really cool. Like that, the pieces I showed you come from a set called Geogami.
Hmm.
So you need always more than one piece of paper, and they become kind of like modules that you add one after the other, and so on. But it really feels great to conquer them, and they look cool.
They do look cool. All right, so let's see. My next question. Oh yeah, this is a question that it's a little complicated, but just hear me out. When the soundtrack of your life is playing in your head, what songs bring out your glee or maybe bring out your rage?
Okay. So I have to pick two songs, one that makes me happy and one that makes me that would show like passionate anger.
Yeah, something like that.
Or like, I mean, of course, I mean, it would be like if it's a song that's just going to describe exactly how I've led my life. It's so cliche, but it would be have to be like Sinatra's "I Did It My Way," because I've always, gone through, or what is it, gone to like a different drum if there's a song like going to the tune of your different drum. But a song that makes me really happy is so geekish, and my husband hates it, but it just makes me smile from ear to ear. And I was about 8 or 9 when it came out, so it's like a great song for kids, and it's In the Jungle. That really, it's a really queer song,
In the
and I
jungle.
can't sing, so I'm not
Oh,
even going to try to.
are you talking
I
about
win,
the
but
the?
wait, I win, but wait, I win.
Yeah, I love that song.
That's my glee, and my son and my husband are like, if it comes out on the radio, I'm so happy. It makes me smile. Or
Yeah,
any Beatles happy song will make me smile
yeah.
too. But I really find that it's tapping into the songs of my childhood that
Hmm.
do that. And rage, like make me angry, or another brick in the wall, the Pink Floyd one. That one,
Okay.
you don't need no education. Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the one that would be like, that's a good, like, sounds like rebellion. Or the Beatles, you say you want a
The Revolution.
revolution?
Yeah,
That's
totally.
another one. Yeah, those are the ones that bring that kind of feel.
Okay,
Am I
cool.
dating myself horribly? I should
No.
have, like, Adele or something.
No. I mean, honestly, I relate more to things that are far, before my generation. So I probably would have answered something along the lines of Beatles too. So it's cool.
But I like, that Beatles Revolution. Green Day has some really good songs that give you that same feeling.
Yeah.
Because I'm not that outdated. I do discover some of the new stuff.
That's cool. Yeah, I just like asking that question just to see how people relate to music. I think music is another language. It communicates to people across different languages and cultures and ages. I mean, you can be 100 years old and still be a Beatles fan. So yeah.
Absolutely.
All right. And my next question is, what's testing your patience right now? What are you just waiting for?
Oof, so many things. Actually, I'm in a very good place right now because my son just started high school and he's adapted to it well. So in my private life and things like that, I'm in a good place. Um, when the Bridge of Death came out, and I had a real publicist, like a traditional publicist, and an online publicist, it was requested by a number of big shows in both radio and TV. But you get placed on a shelf, and you're on the right shelf. You're on the "we requested a" shelf. So eventually, when somebody's doing a show about something that's relevant to your book, they might pick it, and you'll get a call. But eventually, it can mean a number of years.
Yeah.
And I have a good friend who published an incredible book in 1997 called Clandestine: A Black Man's Journey Through the Ku Klux Klan. And I saw him have a huge interview like around 2004, 2005 with Paula Zahn, and they made it sound like it was a brand new book. And then lately, and he was a good friend of mine growing up, and we reconnected through Facebook, and we exchanged books with a dedication, and it's an amazing book. And then lately, I saw him in the History Channel. So, and that book goes all the way back to 1997. But when there's a relevance that excites and interest in his book that is so well written and has such an interesting angle about his journey through life and how different prejudices and historical bigotry has affected it, it's really cool. But it gives me hope because I'm like, okay, so he wrote it in 97, and it wasn't until like 7 or 8 years later that I saw him on TV. Yeah. So there's always hope that my book is sitting on a shelf and that they'll pick it. So I guess that's what's trying my patience, that, I really hope. And I'm not someone who goes to psychics, routinely or anything like that, but I use them for the research of my book. And therefore I've developed some really beautiful friendships with people in that realm. And some of them do so much more than just give a reading. They have these incredible meditation classes or things like that. And I tend to find really great activities through that. So sometimes I'll be in one of those things, and one of these women that I know to be good at at predicting the future are like, oh, it's getting really close. The Bridge of Death is going to be really famous. And I see you getting interviewed everywhere. And I'm like, okay, so that's what's trying my patience. I'm ready. Call me.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Okay. Well, my next question kind of goes along with what you just kind of talked about. This is what you're waiting for right now. So I want you to do a little bit of predicting. I mean, I know you can't see in the future, but what do you think is coming?
Well, for certain, I've connected with some incredible people lately locally. So I'm potentially working on a project that looks very interesting, but I'm not sure how I fit in. But it's become very interesting. So even if I'm not the right person for it, because, not every project is the right project for everyone, it's been very exciting learning through them. But on a personal level, I'm working on a series that I call the Defined series. So the books will have pretty silly titles like Defined by Others, Defined by Marriage, Defined by Drugs. But the writing itself, it's intricate and it's interesting, and the characters are deep. And so it will be novels. It will have a slight touch. I mean, as I'm writing, it does have historical touches as characters go to different places. And probably all of them, there will be a touch of metaphysical, maybe very slight, like an experience in a meditation class or something like that. And so those are going to be very easy read, no footnotes, not real thinking books like The Bridge of Death, but hopefully the kind of book that people put down and say, wow, that triggered those thoughts in me. So yeah, in the future, I would like to be a very prolific producer of nice pieces of writing that are appreciated and accepted by people. So that's what I would like. And since in meditation class they tell you to visualize your future, that's why I visualize.
Well, that's good. I like that. It's very feasible. I mean, you obviously have some talent and you have a wonderful personality, so I definitely see it happening.
So how about you? Where do you see yourself? Are you a 5-year plan girl or a 10-year plan girl? Or when you say the future, do you see it as more open, just the future?
Well, I'm actually the kind of person who probably overthinks things. And so for that reason, I make myself not think too much about it. I mean, I could seriously plan out a 5-year plan, but have it broken down by every day up until that 5 year comes. So I choose to kind of force myself to go with the flow. But I mean, I do have goals at least, you know. I have a day job that I find to be very rewarding, but I want to eventually get to the point where I don't have to have my day job. My ultimate goal is to be able to write my books, and I really want to continue interacting with other writers. I love interviewing authors. Maybe one day I'll even interview other entertainers. But if I can find a way to, you know, pay my bills and do what I'm doing right now, that's my goal. I want to be able to let other people know about the amazing, talented people that are out there. And yeah, so that's where I see happening in 5 years. I will be doing this full time, and maybe we'll be interviewing each other again when you've sold, you know, your 10th book or something.
Well, there you go. That would be great. 5 years, 10 books. Well, actually, the Defined series is flowing very quickly because it's so different. It's limitless. It's purely fictional, but just making sure you get the vernacular of the era correctly. Because I'm not making them. I think that every writer draws from their own experiences, and I had a failed early marriage when I was from 22 to 27. I lived in Sweden, and but I've had a long-term marriage now. But when I opened the online publicist is who put me in social media up until 2 years ago. Yes, it is. This is August. Up until 2 years ago, I was not even in social media. And then, of course, you write the schools you went to and so on, and so you start meeting people from your past. And it's amazed me how many people that I was quite close to have been married a lot of times. So I thought that makes for a really interesting story, writing, creating a fictional character that's had all these intense relationships with different people and how that changes them. And that's where the whole Defined came through. Then all these people that I've reconnected with that have been through rehab programs.
Yeah.
So it's like they were defined by their drug use. And then people that have had either large families or, for example, since I had by choice, my one and only child at 39, a lot of people think that I was, like so many women of my generation, defined by fertility, which wasn't the case at all.
Right.
I took the birth control pill for a million years, decided, okay, I'm going to plunge. And it took a few months, 8 months. I think when you've been, 2 decades on birth control, it only takes 8 months to get pregnant. It's nothing to get, it's cool. Your body's cleaned out all the hormones and all that. So I was happy. But there are people that don't even believe me. I've had to say, honestly, I didn't do anything. I gave up coffee for a month. I gave up caffeine because I read in a book that's nature's contraceptive. So again, like defined by fertility. And, so the titles are kind of cliche and so on, but I don't think that a title defines the book. There you go.
I like that.
So, and those books do lend themselves to being a series of many.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited working with that, and the blogging is also a really cool way of writing. But I've used my blogging more for cross-promoting, for interacting with people, and I don't limit it to authors. I love art of all, in all medias. So I have been including artists and people that have other things to convey.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm with you on there with the whole blogging thing. I like to interact with people on my blog, so maybe I'll be able to interview some artists at some point.
Well, I'm going to tell you a funny story that involves you that I had not realized until we started chatting today.
Oh.
Was why does it sound so familiar, and why does that picture behind her attract me so much? So about a year ago, maybe it's longer, I entered an event on Facebook or something like that and answered questions, and I won a t-shirt that up until very recently was my favorite pajama top, but I washed it so many times. If I had it, I would show you.
Did you win one of my t-shirts?
I won your t-shirt.
Oh my goodness! That's awesome.
And I wore it so many times. That's why I kept on saying, why is that thing? Is it Picasso? It's an art I'm very familiar with.
And that's my design. Thank you.
It was the same piece. And it was a white t-shirt, and that was in black, and it said, "Your #1 fan."
Yes! What a small world.
Oh my gosh, we connected before, and I didn't even realize it.
That's crazy. All right, well, I do have one more question for you.
Okay.
And this one, it's just something I like to ask people. You have been telling me some awesome stories already, so hopefully you got one more to tell me. If you can think about a moment in your life that was just pure pleasure, just fun, maybe the most fun you've ever had, or maybe just the most fun you can remember ever having, just what was the most fun?
Just fun?
Yeah, just fun.
I had so much fun. I've had so much fun my whole life, and my moments, I'm very, very fortunate, are very long and lasting. But probably the most fun I have ever had would be in my 20s. And it doesn't matter where I was going, but a variety, a train ride. Train rides as a 20-something in Europe. I lived in Europe from most of the 1980s. I studied in France for 2 years, and then I lived in Sweden with my first husband for 5.5 years. So I traveled a lot by train throughout Europe, and that's got to be some, all my different adventures on trains were really, really fun. So I guess it would be that.
Well, that's cool. I've never been outside of the country, so that's something I want to experience someday. And my husband said he, rode on trains all over Europe, and that's like one thing I want to do. So I can imagine what kind of experiences you've had, riding those trains. Maybe I'll have them one day myself.
Oh, incredible, because you cross through so many countries and you meet so many different people. And for that, like if you took a train from Paris to Stockholm, for those, and of course they were the cheap milk trains. They weren't the speed trains because I was on a super budget. So for those 18 hours, 20 hours, maybe even longer, because it was the cheapest student ticket. It was the milk stops everywhere. But you would be with all the other younger kids that were using the exact same cheap ticket you were using. So for the longest time, for like a day and a half, you became incredible friends with these people, went bar hopping with them, because sometimes you hit, when trains go on ferries and go through international waters, so you can buy inexpensive duty-free. And so it was a lot of really interesting, neat experiences, and you create this fun bonds. It's fun.
That sounds like fun. I'm looking forward to it myself one day.
Well, but then the least fun was the same, because in my 30s, how old was I? I was about, it's 1993, so I was about 33, 34 years old. I wanted to relive that. So I bought a really inexpensive ticket to go from Lyons, France to London, England. Was that? No, it was from Lyons to Calais, and I was going to take the hovercraft from Calais to Dover, because it's something I had always wanted to do. And no matter how hard you try, you never look as poor as you did when you were a student, and especially a European student, that you walk a lot and your shoes get worn and so on. And I thought I had disguised myself really well, but I was going to visit a friend that had a daughter, and I bought this huge doll that I had inside a duffel bag. So that must have made me look a little attractive. And someone tried to mug me. They pulled out a knife.
Oh, no.
And it was the scariest, closest time I ever came to being seriously harmed. And he was the kind of scary punk guy with a mohawk and tons of tattoos and piercings. Now, this is the early 90s. It wasn't as common Someone with a lot of tattoos then didn't look as friendly as they do today.
Right.
And he pulled out one of those X-Acto knives, the cut, the you used to, and he had me right there, and he was trying to figure out where, because there I was very clever. I was wearing super oversized pants, and I had everything hidden in front, like my passport, my money, and so on. And in those days, I had not become an American citizen yet, so I was traveling with a Mexican passport that I don't think anybody would have protected me. So it was so weird. And I had, kind of put that experience to the back of my mind until recently in a meditation class. They were talking about how when something bad is happening to you, if you try to be on the other person's place, and they were talking about people being attacked in different ways. And they were actually giving examples of women that have been interviewed that were being attacked, that someone was going to rape them, and how they diffused the situation by talking to the person or something like that. And I was like, oh my gosh, I sort of did that, but it wasn't a rape. So I started describing that. I said, when the man was holding on to me, like when the man had me there, and he wasn't alone, it was a very strange thing. I threw him off by my thought. Instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so afraid, when I looked at him, instead of all the tattoos and scariness, I looked at him and I thought the dumbest thing, but I noticed now that changed the whole energy. And I thought, he has the most beautiful blue eyes. That was my thought.
Wow.
And it gave enough time that it totally changed the situation. And the conductor showed up and the guy hid his knife. And I hid behind the conductor and I was like, hey, Ma, il a un couteau, help me, he's got a knife. And so the conductor looked at him. He was a tiny little guy. I'm like, they're going to kill this guy, but I'll use him as a shield.
Wow.
So the conductor got all angry and asked him for his ticket, and the guy didn't have a ticket. So they threw them all off the train. It was like 3 young guys.
Well, that's good. They needed to get kicked off.
It was great. How do you come up with all these crazy questions?
Well, to be honest, I came up with the questions very intentionally. I mean, I read a lot of author interviews because, I like following other authors and learning from them. But it dawned on me that the average person, they're not so much interested in interviews the way, they were like 20 years ago. And it's because a lot of the interviews all kind of sound the same. It's the same questions over and over. How long have you been writing? What inspired you? And those are great questions, but I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to give people a chance to really get to not only know about the authors as writers, and not only to find out about their books, but to get to know them as unique individuals, people that they probably even have things in common with. So that's why I came up with my crazy questions. And because I'm a bit of a geek, I believe that everyone is a bit of a geek for something. It doesn't always have to be geek stuff. You might be a foodie, or, maybe you're really into origami, or, maybe you're into architecture. So, I believe all that's incorporated into getting to know the person. So that's why I came up with these crazy questions.
Well, they're really good. I find that it's so nice when an interview is more personable. And I've had a few that I totally agree with you, that it feels like I've already answered these questions. How can I answer them a little bit different so that I sound more interesting? Because if you have a following of any kind, nobody's going to want to read over and over again the same thing. So, people just visit and leave a little comment, and you notice that they haven't even read the interview, that they think it's all the same.
Yeah.
So it's very clever of you. It's really fun that you do that. And I've noticed a few bloggers have come up with there's one, I think, also out of New York. She's so funny. She has this fun question of the 5 things you would take to a desert island.
Yeah.
And that's a fun thing to do. That immediately is going to get people to read, because it's like, okay, what makes them tick? What would they take?
Yeah.
So that's nice. That's nice that you do that.
Well, I put a lot of thought into it, and I enjoy doing it. So I figure if I enjoy the people who are reading or watching, they should enjoy it too.
That's true.
All right,
That's very
well,
true.
we're at the end of our interview, and Catalina, I have really enjoyed this. I am very excited about your book, and thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for,
Thank you,
spending
Toya.
some
Thank
time
you
with
for the opportunity, and it's been really fun for me too. You really made me think about a lot of things that I hadn't thought about, especially that movie question,
me.
because that one seems so limiting. Like, what on earth would I choose? And it would just have to be a very long and a very intricate one. Because if
Yeah.
you pick a funny short one, you're doomed if that's all you can watch.
Well, like I said, I love asking the question because it's just part of getting to know people, and I love getting to know people, and I have enjoyed getting to know you.
Oh, thank you. Likewise.
So
Thank you, Toya.
this is where I'm going to sign off, and I'm going to say best of luck, best of blessings with The Bridges of Death. It sounds like a phenomenal book, and I'm sure I'll see you on TV one day.
Oh, well, there you go. I'll invite you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this interview. I do hope you found it enjoyable. Please check out the links below to learn more about this author and their work, and also to learn about me, Toi Thomas, the author of the Eternal Curse series, and more.